councillors, staff, members of the gallery, and welcome to the March ordinary monthly meeting of the council. I'd ask you to be upstanding for the affirmation.
Council of Armidale Regional Council declare that we will undertake the duties of the Office of Council in the best interest of our community and faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in us to the best of our skills and judgment.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor O'Connor, the Acknowledgement of Country. Thank you.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past.
Time is almost up. Please finish your message within 8 seconds.
I totally apologise. I'll start again. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
I'm sorry. Your recording time has expired. To send this message now, press hash. To replay your message.
We'll start again. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. The Armidale Regional Community pays tribute to their love of land, love of people and love of culture.
To the General Manager, statement in relation to the streaming of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This meeting is being audio and video recorded, and the recordings of the non-confidential parts of the meeting will be made available on the internet. No other persons are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised by council to do so. The public address on the agenda item tonight, all speakers are requested to ensure their comments are relevant to the particular agenda item. The chairperson may withdraw the privilege to speak where a speaker makes personal remarks or criticisms or uses abusive or inappropriate language. Speakers do not enjoy any special protection arising from comments made during council meetings and should therefore refrain from making defamatory remarks or personal defamatory statements against any individual. And in relation to mobile phones, we ask that those present please ensure your mobile phones are turned off. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr General Manager. Number 3 is apologies. We have an apology and request for leave of absence from Councillor Deborah O'Brien. We'll take a motion to that effect. Councillor Murat and Bailey, those in favour, to the contrary, carried. Disclosure of interests. Are there any disclosures? No? Thank you. We move to public forum, and I'd like to invite Cathy Clare, the Armidale Crime Prevention and Neighbourhood Watch Community Group, to address the council. Thank you, Cathy.
So when let's start anytime. Okay. In recent weeks, there have been many discussions in the wider community regarding youth and crime here in Armidale, not necessarily in the same sentence, with enormous emphasis from the community regarding the lack of facilities or activities aimed at the teenage group. We at the Armidale Crime Prevention and Neighbourhood Watch Group put out a request for ideas from the community that we could take to council to start the discussion with the relevant groups, individuals, organisations, council and including the state government for funding and grants on behalf of the wider community. Some of these are the reinstatement of the Youth Advisory Committee with the employment of a qualified youth worker to liaise with council, police, schools, groups and organisations. A youth centre where they can engage in art, music, writing, recording music, play pool, have afternoon tea and provide a safe place. On the west side area of town, a small park, as the closest one is in the CBD, or there is one swing in the parkland below the lookout. The play equipment has been removed from Alexander Street sometime in recent years and has not been replaced. An upgrade to the current Armidale skate park to be made bigger or expanded so more jumps can be utilised, lighting, CCTV, more seating, tables and shade cloths. An upgrade to Parry Parade Park, new backboards for the outside basketball court, more tables, seating with the inclusion of football posts, The youth in the area used to go to Doty Park for a social kick around. However, that area is now owned by Taz. Youth involved in the street art projects to provide a central graffiti wall where we can get some of the art in areas where there has been graffiti in laneways over in the east and west side, under the bridges, the skate park, Moncton Aquatic Centre, and with the inclusion of the school students and the youth from Backtrack. Another idea proposed was an area or a land acquired where youth here in Armidale can ride their motorbikes, go-karts or scooters that's legal and safe. At present, most of the youth are riding on Crown or private land at the rear or in the area adjacent around Parry Parade. It is an accident waiting to happen. More often than not, there is minimal to no supervision, lack of safety equipment worn by the riders, and 9 times out of 10, the youth are on the road with the cars. Many of these ideas and suggestions are aimed at youth inclusion within the community. At present, many feel there is some disconnect with this age bracket, on top of what has already been a tough 12 plus months for many, with the drought, fire and COVID-19. We ask on behalf of many in the community that the conversations be had around greater development in the provisions for the youth of Armidale Council area, not just for the youth of today, but for the youth in the future, while acknowledging the tremendous ongoing work already being done through various youth-driven organisations and groups within the community. Another little proposal we have is a Bollard Installation. I've given some information to Mr. Ian Tilley. That's the safety report that was done by Senior Constable Chris Jordan. So in 2018, there was approximately 100 grass fires around Armidale. 75 alone occurred along the creekland. In 2019, 90 deliberately lit fires occurred around the town boundary. 90% of those occurred within the town boundary, and approximately 75% of those occurred along the creeklands in the western area of town. The problem is highlighted due to the overgrown creek being a fire hazard. This was brought to the attention of the then CEO in 2019 with the Wellbeing Safety Committee to include the request of rubbish removal and that something be done with the reeds in the creek. We were then informed that weed spraying would commence in January 2020 when appropriate to do so. By this time, however, most of the reeds had been burnt out and had started to regrow. The spraying of the reeds also dries the reeds out, which even they become a bigger fire hazard. At present, unlike yesterday with all the water in the area, everything has been really dry up until the last couple of weeks. Approximately 40 cars per year are stolen every year in Armidale, and with just half that figure torched. In 2020, it was an exception where 35 vehicles were torched. Most of those torched vehicles end up in or near residential areas along the western end of the bike path, accessing via creeklands. This led to the community voicing concerns and having detailed discussions with Senior Constable Chris Jordan, the Armidale Police Crime Prevention Officer, who then conducted the safety report, and the proposal of the Bollard Installation was had come about. The proposal for the Bollard Installation and fire hazard risk of the creeklands was also submitted by our group and noted as part of one of the 25 submissions for the Generic Creek Master Plan 2020. We ask that the Council look at the submission for the Generic Creek Master Plan and what from it can be acted on sooner rather than later, and adopt the overall recommendations in the safety report for our area. It also highlights that stolen vehicles and the burning out of stolen vehicles are given an extreme rating, robbery and fear of crime given an extreme to moderate rating, property damage, antisocial behaviour and fire in the creeklands also rate high. We ask that the Council meet and see if we can obtain some funding through some state grants and see if we can't get the rollout of the Bollard proposal happening and maybe implement some projects aimed at the youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you for the report that you provided me from Chris, which I'll pass on to the General Manager. Clearly there's a lot of resources required to address bollards and other matters, but I do appreciate you making that presentation. Thank you. The second presentation today is by New England Visions 2030, and it's a tag team effort by Maria Hitchcock and Alan Davies. Over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Mayor and councillors. New England Visions Institute has been going for about, I think, 13 months now, and we've made quite a lot of progress. We investigate issues and projects, we meet with stakeholders and experts, we publish reports. At this stage it'll be once a month, and we advocate for action. We're a local think tank of 6 members. So today we're looking at, this month we're looking at wellness centres and hydrotherapy pools, knowing that the town has a problem with its hydrotherapy pool, which has now been closed down, and there's urgent action required to try to get another pool. So the old pool was actually constructed through a massive fundraising effort by the Lions Club 40 years ago, when they saw that there was a great need for a hydrotherapy pool. And it functioned on and off all that time and managed by the physiotherapy section of the hospital, using quite a number of volunteers, and it was considered to be an essential part of therapy for people who had accidents, the disabled, the elderly, and many others. Now, it was closed in, I think, the end of 2019, and a push was made then to try to build another pool to replace it. And council did a lot of investigating at that time. They actually sought funds, and they were given a grant of $2.3 million from the federal government's Building Better Regions Fund and $2.3 million from New South Wales Stronger Country Communities. Now, I've been told by Adam Marshall that that money is actually tied to the project, but I heard today that maybe that's not so. I'd be very upset if that money were actually sent elsewhere, because this is a really important project. So council brought in the Services of Otium Planning group to do a peer review. It was actually a desktop study. They didn't have people coming up to the region at all, and they created this document, which is a very, very thorough document. But it showed that a full business case for a hydrotherapy pool was lacking, and that most regional hydrotherapy pools are run at a loss, which was a problem for this council. The biggest costs are staffing and heating, and the project was put aside because of high financial risk to the council. So on the 23rd of February, Alan and I had an online meeting with Michael King of the Otium Planning Group. It was an extensive meeting. We talked about various projects and a way forward, and Michael has been involved with a number of these major aquatic leisure and community facilities in Melbourne and Sydney, and if it's done properly, it will actually make money rather than lose money. He recommended that we look at establishing a wellness centre with a warm water pool, not a hydrotherapy pool, a warm water pool. Apparently, hydrotherapy pools have all sorts of regulations attached to them that you don't have with a warm water pool. So that was his recommendation. Yeah. Park in Frankston, Peninsula Area Aquatic and Recreation Centre, I think, Park, is a complex with a variety of pool sizes. It has a warm water pool, a sauna, spa, water slides, aquatic playground, toddler pools, a learn to swim pool, physio, gym, shop, cafe, birthday party area. In fact, it has, and a crèche. It has, it's a major centre and attracts an enormous number of people. It's open 7 days a week from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekdays and 7 to 7 on weekends. So it also has, with the warm water pool, it has specialised activities and times rostered on for those specialised activities so that it can be used as a hydrotherapy pool. Some of these warm water pools can actually have floors that are raised to different levels so that you can use them for learn to swim classes, you can use them for a variety of exercise classes. And this Splash Aqua Park and Leisure Centre in Craigieburn is similar. It has a warm water pool. It's available for gentle exercise and relaxation. In order to use that particular pool, you need to be over 15. So that's a bit different from some of the others. It also has lots of facilities and attracts the whole family. So the Guri Wanyara Wellbeing Centre, Kangaroo Flat in Bendigo, also has a full range of facilities similar to other centres, and this is their warm water pool. You can see it has ramps leading down. It has a sauna at one end and spa at one end, and it's well lit. The thing about warm water pools is that we talked to Michael about creating an area at the Moncton pool, just covering one area and turning it into a warm water pool. And he said that's not possible, that it has to be specially built. It can't be sort of renovated from another situation. So the last one I want to show you here is the Barossa Park Wellness Centre in Hobart, hydrotherapy pool. This is actually attached to an aged care complex. So it's a private public partnership using a retirement complex, and this is something that we could think of as well for this area. It includes the hydrotherapy pool, a lap pool and gymnasium. Alan, do you want to say something?
Yes, I would actually. I think the key here is that this is just an extension of where we're going with Armidale. We're really starting to put the runs on the board. And just quickly tell you, it's a bit off the mark with pool, but when I was getting the NBN, we were putting connections on, and I end up at the Aboriginal Cultural Centre at Keeping Place. And when I walked in there, we had to walk through this steel skeleton of an unfinished building. And you know what? I thought, look at this. This is an example of Armidale's community ability not to get things done. It stood there like a statue, basically saying, we can't do it. But it's been done. And now when we look at this swimming pool, I look at the same thing. We go past that swimming pool, the Moncton Centre, and it's like a 60s, 70s classic. It's time to move on. Now, Armidale's been through a lot of hard times, you know, and like everybody in this room knows about it, but I'd like to say well done to you, because there are things starting to change now. You can actually feel it. When we had the NBN, we finished it. What about the airport? We finished it. What about the APVMA? What about the smart farm? What about the secondary college? We're getting a reputation for getting things done. And this pool is something that we need to get done, because there's a lot of smart people in Armidale. I know it's expensive. I can see you there worrying the general manager thinking about this funds, but we put our heads together, we can make this happen. There's probably about $30 million worth here, I'd say. But just on top of why we need it, like Peter Bailey over there, his good wife, and my wife used to go to the hydrotherapy pool at the hospital. Now that was terrible, antiquated, breaking down all the time. This is not on for a modern city. And so now it's time to move on. We build a 12 months year-round operation here. We get as many different facets in there and make it work, because this is what it's like to build a modern city in regional Australia. Now, the pandemic, whilst being such a terrible thing, has given a huge opportunity to regional Australia. You know, because everybody can work remotely. People don't want to work in the city anymore. They want to come out and enjoy a place like Armidale. So again, I put it to you that this is the sort of thing we need to build Armidale, and we have the brains here and the people to do it.
Yeah, and we don't want to tell you what to do, right? So we haven't got an idea. We're not telling you this is what we want at all. What we want is an expert to come and do a feasibility study. Now, you've had Otium Planning do the peer review. That's only part of the study. Why not finish it? Get them back to complete the feasibility study. It probably wouldn't cost all that much, because a lot of the hard work has already been done. It's a matter of getting them up here, looking at locations, talking to stakeholders and so on. And what we want is a multifunctional facility. That's what you've got to have in regional areas, because our population base is fairly small. We need it to cover health, rehabilitation, exercise, leisure, and we need it to cater for all age groups. So it will have funding for the feasibility study is what we're asking for to be budgeted in the next round. We're probably looking at about $35,000 to $50,000. And once we have an adopted plan, then we can go ahead and look for other funding so we can build it in stages, so that we can end up with a project that is a real eye-opener and something that is a great asset to our community. You want to say something more?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak on this. Like I said, there's a real sense of optimism in Armidale, and the key to it is identifying good projects and get them done. And this is a good project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria and Alan. We now move to the Have Your Say segment, and we have the first speaker, Elizabeth O'Hara, and she's speaking on item 9.1, use of bore water at Gyra.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are privileged to live and work, and acknowledge their continued connection to land, water and community. What I'm about to say might appear to be completely a series of non sequiturs and loosely connected points, but I hope it will all come together with blinding clarity at the end. And I'd like to start by considering Malpa's Dam on this wonderful day when it's at 100%, I'm told, and just for a moment think about what the implications are of that. It is filled from groundwater. All the creeks running into it are spring fed. In the harshest of droughts in living memory, which we've just been through, these creeks continued to flow. They were much reduced, but they continued to flow. And for some years now, those people living in the area have reported the cessation of flow from springs. People in this room can describe previously spring-fed dams, which are now purely catchment dams, and bore water levels are known to be dropping. Malpas is topped up by rain events such as we've just had. And in Armidale, we have an interest in really using the waters from the dam wisely and sparingly. That's the first apparent non sequitur. I'd like to turn to the question of the 39A bores, which were permitted to be drilled under the exceptional conditions of the drought. I understand between 12 and 18 exploratory bores were drilled, and of those, 4 were finally considered and moved into operation. In September 2020, at the expiration of those licences, they needed to be capped or to be re-licensed as production bores. During the period between September 2020 and quite recently, the community was assured that any further use of the bores would be for emergency use only, and the phrase perhaps once every 10 years was used repeatedly. Then we learnt at various meetings with council that they were to be used as production bores, and the matter was an operational matter. In what might seem to be another non sequitur, I'd like to go back now to what was for me the most startling challenge to my understanding of how councils operate. I've been taught that council staff gather information to help shape the decisions of the elected representatives. Then in early March 2019, an Armidale ratepayers meeting heard that an extensive advertisement had been placed in a national newspaper for the sale of the airport. This action had been taken without any consultation with councillors, and those who were there, and there are a number of people here tonight who were there, were visibly distressed. It seems to me that the situation that we are perhaps facing now is one in which we must remind ourselves that it's the councillors, our elected representatives, who should be the ones who are driving decisions. With regard to GIRA, the mantra "jobs are important" has been frequently used in the discussion, as has self-sufficient. We must speak transparently. The water collected on site is taken from the environment. It would have flowed into the ground, into the creeks, and fruit, packages of coloured water, are transported from the area. This is not self-sufficiency. The slogan, "There are no jobs on a dead planet," is chillingly accurate. We must be more careful of our water. We hear that the taps were turned off at Costas when the trigger was reached. However, we must remember tanker loads of water were transported from the Bollard Mother of Ducks Lagoon, perhaps for as long as 35 days or more. We must bear in mind Costas DA 4774 from last year for 2 dams, the second 40 megalitres for imported water or bore water, and the acknowledgement in their DEA of a substantial depletion of the groundwater bore that they already have. We must consider the cost to other activities which are being lost as our landscape dehydrates. Our community is looking at greatly increased water requirements in GIRA. The springs and spring-fed creeks are not limitless. It's not magic water. This water, which may have taken thousands of years to accumulate, sustains the unique environmental features of the uplands wetlands, including the Ramsar-listed Little Llangollen. The Armidale Airport was used to be a hanging wetland. Now 70% of New England's bioregion montane wetlands have been drained or dammed. So please...
Elizabeth, can you wrap up now, please?
Can I have my last sentence? This is it?
Yes, of course,
Please. In the interest of transparency and in that of good decision making and in the precautionary principle, can we please take a deep breath, seriously consider the alternatives such as the capping of the bores, which I gather has recently been suggested, and in the event of the next drought, have considered requests for the uncapping and use of those bores facilitated by our council and our councillors.
Thank you, Elizabeth. The final speaker is Jana Hayes, speaking on 9.4 coffee vans policy. Jana.
Hello everyone, it's my first time at council meeting and I hope you'll excuse me, I have my phone on because my notes are on it. So, I am Jana, I am a local mum. I've been in Armidale for 3 years, married into the town and am absolutely loving it. I work at UNE and I'm also on the board at Neerim. For good measure, I have brought with me Melissa Colleen, who is Armidale born and bred, also a local mum. So I'm here tonight on behalf of Vanessa Peterson, another local mum and a community leader who is unable to be here tonight because she's nursing her second child, beautiful little newborn girl. Together with some other parents, a while ago, Vanessa put together an online petition that has since been signed by over 650 people. I have it here with me. And basically the petition is asking that council establish a permanent site at the new playground in Curtis Park, which is made available to coffee vans and food trucks to rent. So I'll just start by saying we understand that this isn't the world's biggest problem, but we do really, really want to be able to have coffee at the new park. It would make such a great asset to Armidale even better, and a lot of parents very, very happy. So, what would it mean? It would mean park goers have access to quality coffee at the park itself. It would create a community atmosphere and enhance the existing park. It could provide rates to council, so it's not necessarily going to cost you anything. And it would provide an additional platform for small business owners, such as the Herd Coffee van, from which to sell their coffee and snacks. There's a strong desire in the community as evidenced by this petition. The petition was signed not just by mums and dads. My kid's grandfather was right on it. He got approached at the park by Vanessa, didn't even know we knew each other. So there's lots of grandparents that are really keen on it, babysitters, older brothers and sisters, everyone that goes to the park would really, really love to see this happen. To everyone that we spoke to about it, they love the idea and it just seems like a no-brainer to them. Everyone's been pretty shocked by the fact that it's just not going straight through because they don't necessarily understand the council processes. So the community supports the proposal because they love the idea that Armidale has an emerging street food culture. They genuinely want an alternative to Hungry Jack's at the park. Fast food does not serve all tastes, and for a lot of parents, it's just not a viable alternative. Many parents don't want to drag their kids across the road. If you are going to go to Hungry Jack's to get your coffee, you've got to either leave the kids at the park, which isn't okay, or, you know, drag them up to the mall, which, to be honest, no one's doing with little kids. So you're not actually taking away from existing business by allowing someone like the Herd van to operate out of the park because you're just adding more business in. It's not taking away from anything because at the moment people just aren't getting anything. What else have I got? Sorry. The Herd Coffee Van is enthusiastic and keen to rent the site once it's made available. So it's fair to say that there's small businesses like the Herd Van keen to see it happen, as well as really strong community support for it. So this presents an opportunity for council to demonstrate that you're listening and responsive to the needs of locals. So there's a big goodwill benefit and also a maybe small little additional income for the council. So in light of the shutdowns of Target and Big W, the community really wants to see evidence that council is committed to keeping Armidale as a livable city that services the community, and this is a really visible way to do that. So I really encourage you to think about it and give it a big green tick. That's it.
Thank you, Jana. We now move to item 7, confirmation of minutes, 24th of February meeting. Is there a mover? Councillor Morat? Councillor Bailey? Any opposition? Put the motion. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. Item 8 is Merrill minute. Sorry? Not on my list. Sorry. Hayley, have you got a... Yep, no, not on the list. Well, I'm sorry, I'm only operating off the list I was given.
Mr Mayor, can I suggest there may have been some confusion with you and the
I'll
general
take your
manager
motion
of the
that the lady be heard.
I move that the lady be
Move,
heard.
seconded Councillor O'Connor. Those in favour of the contrary carried.
Everybody has received a up here too, which may be of interest. Will I hand them up? Well, I'm here to speak about a proposed wind farm development at Ben Lomond. I say proposed. It's been in the wind for quite some time, way back in 2007, 2008 was the initial time. It was marginal then and wiped. Once again, it reared its ugly head July last year, and I wrote to Viv May expressing my concerns about this proposal. And then July this, anyway, so then I've had a couple of correspondences with council, and to be honest, it doesn't seem to be very high on the priority list. I just would like to state, to express our concerns as a community. And I've got here, I wonder how many councillors are aware of the anxiety that has been present in and around Ben Lomond. And I've added, yes, that outpost of Armidale, for the last 8 to 9 months. This unrest concerns the proposed development, Rangoon North and South, of 27 250-metre wind turbines surrounding the village. These would be the highest in Australia. 19 would be visible from the township, 12 from the school, and I might add there is an autistic pupil there and there are implications there. Those turbines for South Rangoon, which is near our property, part of that development would only be 3 kilometres from the village. These would, I believe in Victoria the recommendation for the minimum distance to the nearest dwelling is 1.5 kilometres. It appears it's different in New South Wales. It's all very vague. This proposal would be 1.2 kilometres from our house, 1.5 kilometres from the neighbours on the other side, so virtually it's sandwiched between 2 properties. It would also be just a few hundred metres from our well-maintained airstrip, which is essential for the spreading of fertiliser in the steep hilly country, because we drop below Ben Lomond. We're in a very high country there. An important aspect for the profitability of our property, and also it's used by neighbours. There are huge safety issues there. Pilots are well aware of the presence of this airstrip, which we keep well maintained, and it could also be needed at a moment's notice in an emergency, accidents, fires, mechanical failure, etc. Twice last summer I had to evacuate due to the fires just west of me because I had embers landing on the lawn. This company, Meridian, claim that the turbines can be shut down for these activities, but our pilot told me of a company down south who refused to shut the turbines down anyway. So this can vary whoever this is sold on to. So why is this company totally ignoring these objections and continuing on with discussions? Too close is too close. In our lower timber country, there is a wedge-tailed eagle's nest within 1 kilometre of these turbines. Another negative for the presence of these massive structures. When I questioned the company requesting what are the approved distances in each of these circumstances, the answer, and never are answers, the answer every time was, well, it depends. And this is all due to the greed of 4 to 5 local landowners with no regard whatsoever for their neighbours or local community who have chosen to live in this incredibly beautiful, peaceful and unique environment. This would be eliminated and destroyed forever if this project goes ahead. One wonders if these people will end up resigning to their unpopularity in the local community and become absentee landowners. The division caused by this proposal is already quite evident locally. This scenario would not be good for any environment or community, especially for a small community such as Ben Lomond, which up until this time has been close-knit and cohesive. At a meeting in Ben Lomond last week, a couple from Ilparan who have turbines near their residence spoke of the fact that in spite of the claims from the company involved, that they cannot get any relief from the constant noise, so much so that it has affected their health, and they find that visitors often complain of headaches from the presence of the turbines.
I need you to wrap up shortly, please.
The company are trying to rush this through, and they've made no contribution to Ben Lomond, not like ratepayers. I mean, our family have been involved for 73 years, and I just feel I've got to have it on my conscience that to try and prevent this from happening. And to remind council that we're talking about extremely valuable land. We're getting up around 5,000 an acre now for this land. And council, as we've brought a solicitor on board who is involved in turbines in Victoria, she has asked, did council exercise its right to input to the seers? And I don't think there's been any reaction whatsoever from council. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Item 8, mayoral minute. It's on your screen. I'm going to add a part E before I move it, that the performance agreement be made available to councillors as a confidential attachment, that the performance agreement be made available to councillors as a confidential attachment to the April 2021 council meeting. And with the addition of that clause E, I move the mayoral minute which was circulated to councillors yesterday. Is there any opposition?
I just want to ask a question. Will council?
You may.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will councillors have the opportunity to have any input into
Yes.
KPIs?
At the next council meeting in confidential session. Okay.
Fine, thank you.
Councillor Robinson?
Yeah, I'm somewhat concerned that we made a decision on the Performance Review Committee and now we're changing it. Is it, and because we knew exactly how many councillors there were when we made that decision. So that is a great concern to me, and I would have to vote against this if we don't also consider at this closed meeting the number of councillors on the Performance Review
That's your prerogative, councillor. Advice was taken from Local Government New South Wales Management Solutions. Advice was taken from our financial controller, and we liaised with the general manager, and the performance agreement was put together on the basis of all that discussion. And I take your point in relation to the other, but it's a new council. There's only 7 of us. We've only got 1 half-yearly performance review to do in the remainder of our term, and I put this recommendation to you on the basis of those facts. Okay? So, you want to speak against the mayoral minute?
And I'm just basically saying, for example, that a cynic would say that history is repeating itself. We have 1 councillor who was unanimously elected to the Performance Review Committee, and that councillor, I understand, subsequently said something critical of council, and the next minute somebody wants to remove him from the Performance Review Committee. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? And that is one reason why, if we cannot also discuss this and the reasons for actually reducing the number of councillors on the Performance Review Committee, then I think that I would have to vote against it for the very reason that no justification has been brought for this change from what we decided earlier. And maybe LG, New South Wales, maybe the Performance Solutions did say something about it, but then it's not been passed on to us. We heard this mayoral minute at 6 o'clock last night. So we've had not really time to think about it or discuss it. So that's really why I want to vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. I realised a couple of days ago that this matter has to be dealt with within a period of 3 months. And of course, if we don't deal with it today, we're out of time. But anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. Are there other speakers? Is there a speaker for? Speaker against? No?
No, I've got my...
You're for or against, Councillor?
I'm for this, but I guess I just would like it recorded in the minutes that there's been an undertaking that councillors will have the ability to input into the KPIs and the general...
That's the intent of Part E, okay?
Right, because...
It'll come to you in a confidential session to the next meeting for you to have input, okay?
What, to have my...
To have input, particularly in relation to the KPIs, which I've listed. Everything in this mayoral minute are headings from the performance agreement. Nothing's been left out, so you can explore that, okay?
With respect...
Are you speaking for or against, please?
I'm speaking for it, and I'm
Thank you.
speaking in particular for the meaning that you've attributed to item E, which has just been added as an amendment or an addition, I guess, and that is that I think until recently the situation of women in the workplace and general issues to do with harassment and bullying, things like that, perhaps have not been front and centre in such criteria, and I'm just, I suppose, supporting that amendment because that will give the opportunity for those matters which have become an item of national priority to be discussed and hopefully included in the breadth of the performance criteria for the General Manager. Thank you.
Can I put the motion? I will put the motion if there's no other speakers. Thank you. All those in favour of the mayoral minute with the addition? 5, against, 1. The motion's carried.
My objection being recorded in the minutes. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson requests that her vote be recorded as being against the resolution. Notices of motion, item 9.1, use of bore water at Gyra, page 5, and I think that's Councillor Robinson. Your motion.
Well, I'd like to withdraw this motion and put it to the next meeting because of the difficulties that have been raised. I did, in fact, take legal advice, and I've been told from expert legal advice that Council does have the powers to decide not to use bore water, irrespective of the NRA decision. But under the circumstances, I've seen a lot of, we really need to discuss this properly, and I have had a lot of community members who've wanted to talk to me and they feel they haven't been represented and had their say in this matter.
So
I'm going to withdraw it and resubmit it at the next meeting. Thank you.
Is the council agreeable to the withdrawal? No objections. The matter's withdrawn. Item 9.2, free green waste. Councillor O'Connor.
Oh, I think it's self-explanatory. It's either a matter of whether this, I note and I respect the General Manager's comment, but the General Manager suggested that this matter go forward, so I think it's just a matter for...
Are you moving the notice of motion?
I am moving it.
And is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Robinson. Your motion, Councillor.
Look, I think I understand there's great sensitivity about expenditure, but I think that it's a small amount, and one of the problems that we have here on Armidale Regional Council at the moment is, I think, a question of sorting out our values, and clearly we must ascribe a very high value to financial cost. But there are other matters that have been consistently raised over the 6-month suspension period, and that's in relation to the relationship between the Armidale Regional Council and its residents and ratepayers. It's been said, and it's no secret, that there's been a loss of that fundamental value of cohesion, trust, empathy, compassion, communication, as between our residents on the one hand and the council, both the governing body of council and the executive and operational part of council. My point today is that this is a small matter really from a financial point of view, which should, I think, show a great deal of goodwill towards the way in which our community responded so immediately and dramatically in restricting the demand side of the water budget or water demand during 2019. There's been very substantial financial loss to our community, the loss of trees and plant material and devastation really of many gardens, and those trees are not worth nothing. They're hundreds of dollars worth, those mature trees. And in these circumstances, the added burden of having to now dispose of those people want to replant perhaps more drought sustainable trees and garden materials, but they need to be allowed to get on. And I just think this is a symbolic, if you like, action that pays respect to the discipline and also the very hard work that our residents undertook in order to absolutely shut down their demand when they needed to, the demand for water from Malpas Dam. It's just wonderful that it's now, I think, at 97%, but nevertheless, this would go a long way to redress or perhaps put out a sense of communication and rebuild trust as between Armidale Regional Council and its ratepayers and residents.
Thank you, Councillor. The seconder wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. This has been a very, very difficult time for both council and the community. We've had a loss of staff and resources, and it's been a real blow to everybody. And we've all been kept in the dark about how and why it happened and when anything could have been done to prevent it. And in these really, really difficult times, small things like the green waste can signify a lot. And I believe the green waste is something that we really need to think about and show that we are listening to our community. And at $900 on each day, it's way, way below, for example, the $3,000 in fines we've just had to pay for taking water from the Gyra bores without a licence. Now, if there is any difficulties, and I think there might be, this might have to go out for public consultation, and if that's required for 28 days, then it could go out tomorrow and if there's no submissions, and I pretty much imagine there wouldn't be any submissions against this idea, it could be we could go out for 28 days and then either be approved in April, or we could amend the motion now to say that if there's no submissions against it, then we approve it and it goes ahead anyway, because that quite often happens with public consultations. So, and I note also that according to the quarterly budget review, landfill revenue has increased by $802,000 and expenses decreased by $500,000 because of the delays in opening the new landfill. Compared with that, the cost of 2 days of free green waste are peanuts. So please consider supporting this to show that we care about our community and that we are listening to their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a speaker against?
Yep.
Councillor Gladley.
Being the avid gardeners that Councillor Robinson and Councillor O'Connor are, I understand and I do agree with this to a certain degree, but I think this might be a very good job for the new council that's coming up in a few months' time. They'd probably be able to trim this a bit better and even make it more appealing for these avid gardeners that we've got about here. So I think we've got more important things at the present to move on and give our staff to do. So I'll be actually voting against this. Thank you.
Speaker for, speaker against. Right of reply, Councillor.
Very brief. I acknowledge what Councillor Gladley has said, but I think given the matters raised, the financial matters raised by Councillor Robinson, it's a big. You get a big bang for your buck in terms of doing what we have to do now. We can't kick this trust issue down the road to the next council. We have to deal with it now. So I just urge my colleagues to support this small expenditure for what I think is a sign of support for our community.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. Those in favour of the motion, raise your hands. 2, those against. 4, the motion's lost. 9.3, Water Security Report. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was just curious about, well, I wasn't just curious. I think given the General Manager's comments, I think we're at ADDEM, and I don't think there's any dispute here. I'm not pressing a time on which these matters might be raised, but it would be, or might be reported to us, but I think it's important that we...
Have you moved the motion?
Sorry, I haven't. I moved the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr
Is
Mayor.
it seconded? It's not seconded? It's seconded for discussion? Yes, I've got that. Councillor O'Connor, your motion?
My motion is that the council, the governing body, be provided with a briefing or the options paper from the New South Wales Government, which I understand has been provided in relation to the ways in which our region's water security can be improved. I think this is a matter of critical importance to the elected councillors, and I don't think that that's contested in the General Manager's comments, so I really don't have much more to say. I just hope that we get briefed on these and other reports relating to our water security.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak for the motion? Councillor Robinson? Thank you. Is there opposition? No speakers against. I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour? 2, those against. 4, the motion's lost. 9.4, coffee vans policy. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I do move the motion. I really thank...
The motion is moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Robinson. Your motion, Councillor.
Look, I think that the very clear presentation by Jana says it all, really. It's a small thing, but it's just something to kind of enliven spaces where the community wants to see more placemaking, more activation, and all that's being asked for here is that a policy be developed. We are in the process of reviewing our policy, so it's an ideal time to do that. And I don't think there's any objection from the staff in relation to this, so let's go for it.
Speaker, seconder, like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I think Jana said it all, that this is basically a no-brainer. There's so many benefits and no real drawbacks. And I think really we have to decide where our resources are going while we're in charge of this council. We want them to go on bureaucracy and 1.4 million on a performance improvement order that we know nothing about, and we don't really know exactly why it costs so much. I thought it was only going to cost a few $100,000 at the most, not $1.4 million. So let's look into our finances, and if we can't afford this, then there's something radically wrong with this council.
Thank you. Speaker against? Councillor Morat?
Just a question, Mr Mayor. Has council got a food van policy or policy on food vans in general?
Mr Mayor, not that I'm aware of, but I may stand corrected.
The officer responsible is nodding. Sorry.
We do.
There is a basic policy. It's probably not as comprehensive as what you would like to achieve, but I'll just point to Part V. The vending vehicle shall not operate within 100 metres of a retail food premise open for trading and within 100 metres of any licensed premises. So our planning staff rely on that, and there's a few other parts to that policy. I think it's a policy, and I'm happy to circulate that, and if that needs further amendment, well, yeah. But that's the main thing they rely on.
Elsewhere in our business paper, we know that we're reviewing 140 odd policies, and we've done 38 or something. Is this one of the policies yet to be reviewed?
I'd have to check that, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Well, Mr Mayor, in view of the uncertainty, I'm happy to defer this matter to the next meeting so that Mr McDonald can make his inquiries and councillors can be satisfied that this is a sensible deployment.
Thank you, Councillor. The matter, item 9.4, is deferred to the April monthly council meeting.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Item 9.5, cost shifting, Councillor O'Connor.
Once again, Mr Mayor, I move this and...
Moved, is it seconded? Seconded, Councillor Robinson.
Mr Mayor, I thought this was something that you suggested in another place that we might address. Actually, it was the same place but in a different context that we might address. As you know, we've been going through budget sessions and cost shifting is an issue that affects the entire sector and probably all local government sectors across Australia, and this is the idea of writing and to various authorities to remind them that how difficult it is to be on the receiving end of so much, the cost of so much shifting of responsibilities to the sector is, I think, a no-brainer really, and it's just our response. We do have an advocacy role and it's not a really big job. It's not, again, quite a small matter. Thanks.
The seconder wish to speak?
Again, I mean, we keep on saying we've no resources. This is one way of looking into how we might possibly get resources and have a financially sustainable council in the future, which is really what our performance improvement order is all about.
Thank you. Is the speaker against?
Mr Mayor, I'll speak against it on the basis that I think before we go down this line, we should find out what local government New South Wales policy is on cost shifting and get a copy of their policy, because they're our voice in the government, and if they've already got a policy in place, it'd be nice to endorse that policy rather than creating another problem. And I think we're better off to work with them because they're united, a group, and they can represent all the councils to ensure that their voice is better heard, as was indicated when we got superannuation up as an issue.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm aware from looking at standing policy of LG New South Wales that most, if not all, of these matters are contained in existing policy. But I don't see any harm in particularly going to our local member to reinforce our view in support of the existing association policy. That I've probably spoken for. Speaker against? Okay, right of reply?
Simply to reiterate, to accept and agree, Mr Mayor, that was why I didn't investigate that, because I'm already more than aware how long and loud Local Government New South Wales has been advocating to the New South Wales government in relation to the damage that cost shifting is doing. And in fact, this was a major issue during the review of local government, which led to the mergers and other fit for the future policy development. That the elephant in the room was that cost shifting was not part of the terms of reference and not considered when Mr Mike Baird, the then Premier, declared that local government was broken. So I think that the Local Government New South Wales this is absolutely compliant with their policy, and that they would be thrilled to think that we were adding another voice to their lobbying.
I'm sorry, that concludes the debate. I was going to suggest we take this to the next local government conference. Sorry.
Well, I'll be delighted.
Okay, so you might add that?
Oh, yes, I'm happy to...
That these matters
that
be
these
the subject
matters
of council motions to the next conference.
Well, you can do it. I'll accept whatever amendment you propose, so long as it...
So we added part B, sorry about this, that these matters be the subject of council motions to the next Local Government New South Wales State Conference. And no doubt we'll get told there, as Councillor Bailey's suggesting, it's already policy and we won't get to speak to it. But anyway, but that's added. Everybody agreed with that?
Yep.
Or enough agreed? We're all agreed? Okay, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? To the contrary, carried. 9.6, Councillor O'Connor, water pricing and drought policy. Your motion,
Look, I've taken on board the response from the General Manager, and I want to withdraw this for now because I do think it's more appropriate to be dealt with through the budget process.
Okay, thank you for that. 9.6 is withdrawn. 9.7, Councillor Robinson, invitation to the Auditor General.
I defer to Councillor O'Connor. She might want to move it.
Look, I note the General Manager's comments, and I think that this map is best deferred so that we can get the information the General Manager's requested.
Thank you. So item 9.7 is withdrawn. Thank you. So we move now to the 10 series items, and I'm going to call these 5. 10.1, Policy Review Project Status Update. 10. Say loud yes if you want us to talk to it. Pathway Name and Address Amendments. Code of Meeting Practice, we have an addition in 10.3, so I'll call that. Thank you. I'll call that. Oh, you can, Councillor Robinson. Anyway, 10.4, Disclosure of Pecuniary Interests. 10.5, the Councillor Staff and Interaction Policy. You just say you have a question, other than what you asked on Monday night. Okay, so we can adopt by consent 10.1, 10.2 and 10.4. Take a motion to that effect. Councillor Gladley, Councillor O'Connor. 10.5 was called and 10.3 was called. So I've taken the motion. Councillors Gladley and O'Connor. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. 10.3 on page 17. We have had a suggestion from the General Manager that a clause D be added. Do you have that, Hayley? No? Amend. It's coming up? Coming up? Okay. That's self-explanatory, and that's been recommended by a General Manager, and I strongly support it. Surely. Okay. That we add a clause D, amend clauses 3.3 and 3.4 of the policy to include workshops and councillor briefings. General Manager, if you need, can explain what that means.
Yeah, thank you.
All okay?
We are getting us. I'd just like to know what the implications of that are. I mean, I probably should know, but.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So as it currently stands, the reference was only to council meetings and extraordinary meetings. And as we know, some of those clauses, 3.32, 3.34, talk about briefings and workshops being open to the public as well. Currently at 3.3 and 3.4, it didn't actually delineate that. So now that's just making it crystal clear in addition to council meetings and extraordinary meetings. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'd just like to ask some questions, if that's possible. And really what I wanted to do was ask really why the submissions aren't being made public, because until recently we had a policy of making all public submissions that came in public in the business papers, and it doesn't seem to be happening anymore. Is this something that's now is this a changed protocol so that the public aren't entitled to see public submissions?
There's no reason why, Mr. Mayor. That shall be done first thing tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
And is this going to be a policy from now on that public submissions can be made public?
Where the submitter so agrees.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. I think we did deal with that a couple of meetings ago, didn't we? Okay.
So that it's not happening.
Thank you. Okay. Can I now put the motion on 10.3 with the addition of clause D? All those in favour? To the contrary, carried unanimously. Item 10.5, council and staff interaction policy at page 22. Thank you. Councillor Robinson can I take a motion first of all, a substantive motion to adopt the recommendation or something else? Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded. Councillor Gladley. You have a question, Councillor Robinson, before we commence debate?
No, my question is simply that have there been any disrespectful or excessive uses of the council request system or excessive uses of questions on notice of motion or committee reports? And I'd also might like to make a very brief suggestion that when there are difficulties or...
You've asked the question. I've got to seek an answer to the question first. Can somebody answer that other than me?
Mr Mayor, I'm more than happy to take that question. I think what I would respond by saying is, what would you call excessive? I mean, I would respond that back. I think if that's your question, I think moreover, it gets back to our ability to resource the level of questions and queries that come through from councillors from time to time in any given month. So, as I mentioned to you the other night when I think a similar question was asked, in an organisation where we're fully staffed, we're running in an incredibly efficient and effective manner, and we've got time to sort of sit back and smell the roses, then no, when you get sort of comments and questions in from time to time, you've got the time to be able to respond. Given our current plight, we're down significantly, probably got a staffing level 10% lower than what we would normally have. Lots of issues that we're trying to deal with as a council, both from a staffing perspective and obviously from the council perspective. We're limited in our resourcing and we're time poor. When there are significant numbers of queries and questions and those sorts of things that come through, and I might add that it's mentioned in some of the papers 107 in the first 2 months, and I think that's probably understated in terms of some of the requests from councillors. It does become quite onerous. So I think really it's a point in time thing. So if we're well resourced, we can handle it. Currently, in the current situation, it does become a bit excessive and difficult for us to be able to respond in the manner that we would really like to, and that I think that you deserve as the elected body.
Thank you.
And my other question was, maybe this might make it a bit easier for everybody if, for example, when questions or notices are asked, that some indication is provided of the time taken to answer them, so that, or deal with them in any other way, so that councillors can know where the difficulties lie, and then we can really get a better system that everybody's considering everybody else's time. And I think that might be a good way around some of these problems. Thank you.
That's a statement, not a question, but we'll leave it there. I mean, there's a good example that I saw just today, Councillor. Your email to the General Manager about matters that you wanted done with the ESAC committee, and you know his response. I think that typifies the need for this particular clause. I propose to put the motion, if you're agreeable, as printed. All those in favour? To the contrary, carried unanimously.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I've just been advised of a pressing family matter. I'll have to apologise and leave the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We all hope that goes well.
I'm sorry, I've got a terrible headache, so I have to leave the room as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best, Andrew. And Councillor Robinson is leaving the room. So we move to the 11 series. Local Strategic Planning Statement, Implementation, Cash and Investment Report, and Sale of Property Proceeds. Anyone? I had a feeling, page 38, that needed to be called. No? So that none of those are called. I'll take a motion to adopt You're moving the 3 by consent. Thank you, councillor. Is there a seconder? I'll second it. Oh, Councillor O'Connor seconded it. Is there opposition? Put the motion to adopt those 3 recommendations. All those in favour? To the contrary? We'll go again. Those in favour? To the contrary, carried unanimously. Item 12, Environment and Infrastructure. 12.1, refusal of DA application in Faulkner Street. Is it okay? Not called. Councillor Gartley is calling 12.1. 12.2, donation, the Boulevard, confirmation of arrangements. 12.3, proposal to update the 2015 flood study. 12.4, possible planning agreement, Rangoon Wind Farm. I think Councillor O'Connor just beat you, Councillor Blackley. So Councillor O'Connor. 12.5, Martin's Gully Bridge replacement. 12.6, New South Wales Public Space Legacy Program. I'll get in trouble if I don't mark these. 12.7, Kempsey Road reconstruction. 12.8, I think we need to call that, Mr. GM, do we? There's a recommendation to defer. Yeah, we'll call 12.8. 12.9, development application approvals. 12.10, implementation of New South Wales Government Park and Pay Up. 11, Natural Resource Access Regulator notification penalty notice. 12.12, Gyra Preschool and Long Daycare Centre project update. 12.13, Kempsey Road, removal of hazardous trees. So I'll take a motion, please, to adopt by consent all items except 12.1, 12.4 and 12.8. Is there a mover? And Councillor Gladley, Councillor O'Connor, no opposition. Put the motion. All those in favour? To the contrary, carried. 12.1.
Mr. Mayor, just before we go, could we ensure we used to get the agenda, the first page and half the agenda,
Yes.
a printed copy?
Okay, so you haven't got that?
No.
Oh, see, I have. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Can we just get the first page and a half
Yes.
printed?
Yes.
It makes it very difficult when we're flicking through.
Sorry about that. Yes, that's important. Then you can mark your items, knowing what you're going to call and not call. Okay, I'll slow up a bit. I'm sorry about that. 12.1, the refusal of the DA in Faulkner Street at page 43. I need Councillor Gladley, but I need a mover of a motion. You're moving the officer's recommendation. Thank you. And seconded. Okay. Do you wish to speak for the motion, Councillor O'Connor? No speakers for. Seconder?
Speak in favour. Look, I think we've got to back our planning staff. We're in a situation where they're proposing to take away some car parks, and I think it's incumbent upon developers, when they do decide to not provide car parks, to make the financial contribution to council, because we've got to provision car parks on a regular basis. Sometimes they need upgrading. Sometimes we might like to put electronic systems back in place, and I think we need to ensure that we've got a good cash reserve so that we can plan for the future with car parking. So that's why I'd support the recommendation.
Speaker against? Councillor Gladley?
I think this comes up at a time when we're trying to get businesses into Armidale. This is I walked past it again this morning. I've walked past it 3 times, and there was 4 cars in it on the way down here in the parking area there, and the other day there was 8, and then there was 8. So I don't know if that's typical of the use of it. It's a very big building, and we've got a developer that wants to spend $500,000 in it by putting offices in there that has probably got the potential to put about 20 people working in there. This is a big shell of a building that I think could be very well used. In recent times we've seen Big W gone, which is, I presume, would have employed 30 or 40 at least people that were parking a block away from where these present parks are. We've got Target that's also going. When we had our survey done to see what our parking was like in the centre of town a couple of years ago, we've definitely advocated with parking. So here we are. We got a bloke that wants to spend a bit of money in town and put some offices in there. In the mall, yes, we've got plenty of empty buildings in the mall, but it's specialty shops they want, not offices. They want people to go in there to spend money, to stay in the mall and do such. They don't like even real estate agents or whatever it is in there because they're not good for the setup that they seem they want. As far as putting with the council, with our officers putting against, I understand the whole system the way it is, but I don't think it's going to, losing a handful of car parks is going to be the be all and end all of what we've got there. So I think we should give this the flick, let this bloke come in here and do the expansion that he wants and spend a bit of money in town and applaud him for actually wanting to invest in Armidale, because there hasn't been a lot of carrots around for people to invest in Armidale lately. I just think it's a good way of going forward and looking after businesses in Armidale. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, sorry, I'm probably jumping the gun, but I just would like to have a right of reply if I could on that.
Yes, I'll get to that. We have something of a dilemma in that we can all count there's only 4 of us here. I feel the need to speak, but I need to speak against the recommendation. And we've had 2 in a row, but can you bear, is it you okay if I do speak? I'm out of sequence.
What are we going to do?
It'd be good if you spoke for, then I can speak against.
Sure, but the question is, if we're in court, then what's the point? Aren't we going to have to defer this?
Beg pardon?
If we are in court, what is the point?
We're not in court. 4's a quorum. We've got 7. We have 7.
Oh.
We're not in court.
Yeah, I didn't think we were, but
No.
I thought that's what you
So
said.
are you going to speak, or are you going to wait for a right of reply? And if you're going to wait for a right of reply, you're okay for me to speak against it?
Yeah.
Thank you. We were told on site yesterday, and I wish he was here, but he's not, that we had a study plan, a traffic plan for the CBD done some 2 years ago. And unfortunately, nobody at this top table was here at that time. But it said that we had adequate parking. And given that, I feel that it's reasonable to allow a reduction in parking here from 24 to 19 on the basis that the proponent, the applicant's going to spend a large sum of money in further commercial development in our CBD. So I wish Ambrose was here to back that up, but can any staff officer verify what I've just said in relation to the traffic plan?
Mayor, my understanding, without remembering or knowing the details, was we do have enough parking. That's always, as it's been explained to me. The planning manager did offer up a amendment. Can I show that to you?
The amendment from the parking officer is still refusing the application for modification. Yeah, but the intent of that is still the same, essentially, as the officer's recommendation. So I've spoken against the officer's recommendation, and you'll have to conclude the debate, Councillor.
Oh, thanks. I suspect there may be an error in what you said. With great respect, I understood that the deficit was going to be 18 or 17 or 18 parking spaces, not 5.
Oh, well, my understanding at the site visit was that there was a total deficit of in the order of 17 or 18 parking spaces from public parking.
Correct, there's already been dispensation of 13, plus another 5, bringing it up to 18.
That's already been accounted for through that DA, and so he has supplied those.
Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Connor's got the floor.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. So I think this is a situation that's crying out for a voluntary planning agreement to resolve the differences. I don't like to ever see, public parking sort of crushed, because we're not just thinking of today, we're thinking of maintaining a fluid and good parking, good access to public parking into the future. So I think that when you look at the aggregation of 18 deficits or deficit parking spaces as a result of this DA, it's not appropriate. I would agree with the planning officer that we should reject this today, but note that we would like to see discussions around a voluntary planning agreement in relation to this total deficit of 17 or 18 parking spaces.
So in your right of reply, you're proposing something other than the original motion. You're making life very difficult. But that's...
Oh, you're the boss. You can sort it out.
Correct. I'm well aware of that, Councillor. And that's why I'm equivocating a bit.
Sure. Could I just say too, the other conundrum here for the council is if it refuses this DA, then it's got to approve something in terms of applicable conditions to apply. Because if the recommendation's for refusal, council's not accepting that, it's therefore accepting the DA. Therefore, there need to be some conditions attached to it, and I don't know that council's in a position to necessarily do that right here and now.
Could I suggest that the motion be put to the vote as is, and if it's defeated, we then put another motion up which might go to the VPA, for example? We agreeable? It's a bit out of order. Look, I think you've concluded the debate, so we'll, and the GM's spot on, we have to give some advice one way or the other to the applicant. So I'll put the motion that the officer's recommendation, page 43, be adopted. Those in favour? 2. Those against? I'll use my casting vote to defeat the motion on page 43, and I'll move A and B as printed on page 43, with addition of a clause that we advise the applicant of the determination and include other potential options, comma, including a voluntary planning agreement, comma, available under the EP&A Act 1979, which may satisfy the requirements of Chapter 2.9 of the Armidale Generic DCP 2012, the last 2 lines.
Just to clarify, so that at paragraph B we do refuse the DA and suggest...
Yes, we're still refusing it, but we're holding out, we're saying what we're prepared to do, and that's to consider other options, including a VPA. All happy with that? Yes, and under our code, as we know, we've got to have a division, and all names have to go on the minutes. So I'm getting a sense that is someone seconding that, by the way? Thank Councillor O'Connor, thank you. No opposition? We better wait for... It's seconded by Councillor O'Connor. After the word options, Hayley, put a comma, including a voluntary planning agreement.
I'm still a little... I'm sorry, I don't want to speak out of turn.
Now, just let's get this on the screen so we know exactly what we're voting on. including voluntary planning agreement, comma, available under the EP&A Act 1979, etc. So there may well be other options, which we haven't got the planning officer here, unfortunately, but that's his wording. So this was a bit round and round the mulberry bush, but it refuses it as it is, but it gives us an option to enter into a VPA or some other arrangement which will be beneficial to our ratepayers. Yes?
I just want to be doubly clear or get advice through you, Mr. Mayor, or perhaps the General Manager, that if we pass this, we're not actually passing two completely contradictory motions.
No.
We're not.
No, we're still refusing, which was...
But we refuse to refuse by your casting vote.
As the GM said, if we knock back the officer recommendation, which we did, we're obligated to pass something else.
Okay, so long as everybody's happy.
Okay.
People wiser than I are happy,
I think we
I'm
are.
happy.
You happy, Hayley? Oh, sorry. Your name went. You're right. Okay, thank you. Can I put this motion? I can. All those in favour? To the contrary, I think it's carried. That's the one we've got to put our hands up. All four names go up as voting in favour of the motion, which is a requirement, as you know, under our code. Next item is 12.4 on page 54. Okay. Do we have someone prepared to move a motion? Councillor O'Connor, you have your microphone on. Are you?
Well, what I would be happy to do is move an amendment that item B be deleted. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sorry? Be out.
Excuse me, no cross table, please. Your motion is the officer's recommendation, page 54, with the deletion of B. Is there a seconder? It is seconded.
I'd also like to
that
delete...
we don't delegate the authority to the GM.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Your motion, Councillor.
The deletion of E as well. So
Well,
there's no delegation and there's no assumption that a report, well, there's an E. Is
someone prepared to second the motion, which is now A, C and D? We have a seconder.
Do we?
Yes, Councillor Bailey seconds it. It's your motion, Councillor.
Thank you. Look, who's my seconder? Oh, sorry, Councillor Bailey. Look, I don't have any issue with noting that this is a state significant development. I don't have a problem with us having in mind that any potential contribution, as it states the old item C, should be better than the 1% contribution under section 712 of the contribution plan. And I don't have a problem with considering what the impacts and benefits might be to the Ben Lomond community. But I think that the motion as it was originally put with B and D, E within it, is making an assumption that this project is going to go forward. We're not at that stage yet, and there's, as we've heard today from Mrs. Webb, there's enormous community dissatisfaction with this proposal, and whilst we're not the consent authority, we are bound, I think, to properly represent our whole community and those within it that are going to be severely affected by this. And, you know, I don't, if the matter is to go ahead, well, then certain steps could be taken. in relation to delegations to the General Manager and the nature of planning agreements, but we're not there yet. And we know we've got a community that's devastated by this proposal, and I think, and we've done no consultation with them in relation to this, other than, I think, having one officer attend one community meeting. And on that basis, I think it would be improper and unsafe for us to put the cart before the horse, if you like, and assume that this matter is going ahead. I was involved with a solar farm proposal that basically was going to devastate another village in our LGA. Might have been actually in Urallas, I'm not quite sure. The other one, the Neonan one out at Arding. And look, in that case, the company realised that they didn't have a social contract to put, to basically install a, huge renewable energy plant in the middle of a village. Effectively, this is a similar proposal, the only difference being that it's wind farm turbines, wind turbines. I don't really think we need to take this step by step, and it may be that better arrangements can be made. And one of the really big issues that we have in our LGA is the fact that the state government, without consultation with the local government sector at all, determined that our region would become a new renewable, one of the 3 renewable energy zones in New South Wales. This has got huge impacts, but the solutions are pretty straightforward, and that is that instead of there being a completely haphazard, process by which private, large companies just do seek private deals with landholders, that there's actually some coherent, what is it? Oh, thank you. Oh dear, I'll be in trouble with Councillor Gallatley. Nevertheless, I'll finish it. I think my view is that we've just got to press the state governments for some coherent planning in relation to the social and environmental impacts of these projects.
Thank you. The General Manager's made the point. Items B and E deal with the planning agreement. So does C. So it should come out too. Would you agree? Any agreement should be equivalent to it. That's talking about the nature of the contribution. An agreement should be equivalent to or better than the 1% contribution would normally receive under 712.
As a provisional.
Well, perhaps the General Manager might explain why that should come out, please.
Okay.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Only that, it's a bit like night following day, I guess, but if we're not going to be negotiating for a planning agreement, then the quantum is irrelevant, and C relates to the quantum. But seeing I've got my mic on, Mr. Mayor, I might just take the opportunity to make the point that my experience with these sorts of developments, regardless of which way they might go, but if the council has any interest in getting any sort of funding to maintain infrastructure longer term, or to be able to do anything that it might want to do as a result, it's always better to be in nice and early negotiating with these. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving tacit approval to it. It's just really saying that if it's going to go ahead, let's be on the ground floor nice and early, talking to them about what those opportunities might be for a quantum of funding or a range of projects that for the area, particularly around Ben Lomond, that might be, including repairing roads and those sorts of things. So that's the only reason we're talking about getting into a VPA nice and early. But I respect the debate, and where it goes, it goes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I make a point, please?
Well, you've had your opening speech, and you're the second. Are you entitled to speak next?
Okay. Why can't we ask, what are they called, Rangoon Wind Farms? Couldn't we delay this whole process and ask Rangoon Wind Farms to come and present to the next council meeting? Because it is a vital issue. There are concerns about the closeness to the wind turbines for houses. There's concerns about the airstrip. They seem to be reluctant to answer community concerns. Why can't we ask them to come and speak at the next council meeting?
None at all, Mr Mayor.
Okay, how does the mover of the motion feel about that proposal?
I'm actually very happy with that, and I would accede to the general manager's suggestion that we delete C and substitute a new paragraph to the effect of Councillor Bailey's suggestion, and that the Rangoon people.
Could I suggest that you move that the matter be deferred and council invite the proprietors of Rangoon to address the next council meeting?
Is everybody happy? Yep, we're very happy.
It's
with that.
moved and seconded. Is there any opposition? No. Okay, well, let's put the motion. All those in favour to the
So we've
contrary
deleted all
carried.
the rest of it.
That's all
We're still going to note.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That the matter be deferred. Okay. The motion is withdrawn. The mover and the seconder agree to withdraw the motion, and in lieu, it's been moved and seconded, as I just said, that we seek Rangoon to address the council at the next council meeting. Got it? Okay. All those in favour? To the contrary, carried unanimously. It's been suggested, I'm now on 12.8, page 69, by the General Manager that this matter be deferred for consideration pending the outcome of a peer review. And I'll get the General Manager to explain why that is so, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think just whenever council is the applicant of a DA, I think it's always good practice to ensure that when we and our staff are also preparing the assessment report, it just makes sense to have that essentially peer reviewed or that paperwork put out to another council or a third party, just to make sure that we can have that independent advice coming back to council, and we're not being seen to assess our own development applications and then approve them. So it just makes good sense.
Thank you. And as I recall, Councillor O'Connor raised that point on Monday at our information session. So would you like to move that, Councillor?
I so move.
Thank you. That this item be deferred. Second to Councillor Bailey. That this item be deferred for consideration. That this item be deferred for consideration pending the outcome of a peer review. Do we need to nominate the council or not? No? Okay, thank you. It's seconded somewhere, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Bailey. No opposition. All those in favour? To the contrary, carried. To the... Come on, we're travelling very well, Councillor. Item 13, calling these items Arts Northwest LGA Summary. 13.2, public exhibition of property addressing and naming our roads. 13.3, sorry. Good to go. 13.3, library collection development policy draft for public exhibition. 13.4, library community information display policy draft for public exhibition. 13.5, library use and conduct and code of conduct policy draft for public exhibition. 13.6, request for a fee waiver, the Armidale and Guyra halls for Youth Week activities. And 13.7 hasn't come out real well here. Restore and Thrive, realigning council's organisation structure, on which we had a pardon? No, you called it. That's fine. 13.7 called, and we have a supplementary 13.8, which is the minutes of the council of village tours and town meetings. Okay, not called. Take a motion to adopt all of the 13 series with the exception of 13.7. Councillor Galatly. Councillor O'Connor. Any opposition? Put the motion. All those in favour? I think it's carried. To the contrary? Carried. You okay, Councillor Bailey? Just sleeping, right? Okay. 13.7. We had a good discussion on this matter in our information session, but you might have a question, Councillor?
No, I'd just like to really thank the General Manager for providing this information to us and invite him to add any general comments that he'd like to put in the public domain. Thank you. Whatever. Just give him that opportunity. If through you, Mr. Mayor, if the General Manager would like to make a comment, that'd be helpful, I think, to the wider community, given that we're streaming live.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, very happy to. Thanks, councillors. I think this, I guess, with the benefit of having been here maybe now a bit over 2 months, 10 or 11 weeks, one of the things that has really struck me is that we've got I think we've got a great organisation and a great staffing group that have perhaps suffered a little bit over the last few years, particularly perhaps the last 12 to 18 months, and part of that has been around staffing numbers, and as we talked about earlier, and I think as part of that too is perhaps some what I would consider to be, in terms of local government terms anyway, some ideal alignment around where certain areas of the organisation best sit, and there's a lot of crossover and a lot of I guess within the structure at the moment. It's probably sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but I've got 100 thoughts going through my head. But essentially, probably one of the biggest questions, or the most asked question I've been asked from staff in my time here so far has been, when are you going to do something about the structure? What's the idea there? And a lot of that's got to do with the fact that teams are split right across 2 directorates essentially at the moment. It's quite disparate, and a lot of it doesn't really make sense in some respects. So part of the review thus far, and the idea around creating 3 directorates, is essentially to try and align us or realign us to that traditional corporate engineering and planning areas of council, and try and align teams up in those particular areas and have that greater alignment. And I think once we achieve that, and an example of that is the moment that we've got strategic planning and the planners who look after our local environmental plans and draft control plans in a completely different area from the regulatory and compliance teams and the broader planning teams. So aligning those activities, for instance, of council, having asset management sit perhaps a little more closely with the finance team. For example, having our project managers align a little closer with our engineering teams and as well as the asset team as well. We'll just start to iron out some of those wrinkles and those concerns that are stopping us from delivering well for our community and our council, and then more broadly, the goal to start to really become a high-performing team over time, and also look to address some of the culture and those systemic issues that have plagued us for a little while. So, this is the beginning of that, and recruiting to an executive team, and then working with an executive team to, better align the rest of the organisation is going to be a longer-term goal, but one that certainly has been well received by the staff thus far. This report has been circulated to all of the staff, had lots of discussion with consultative committees and staffing groups and forums that I've presented to, and there seems to be, I think, once we get into the nitty-gritty, there's always going to be a little bit of toing and froing, but I think that the basic realignment of this structure and the creation of those 3 directorates is a very good start that appears to be well supported by the staff, and it'll help us start to deliver much better for our community longer term.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. General Manager. Councillor O'Connor, are you prepared to move the officer's recommendation?
Yes, I do want to move it, and
thank you.
I would like to say one sentence.
I'll just get a seconder. Is it seconded? Yes, it's seconded. Councillor Bailey, away you go.
I'd just like to move this motion and thank the General Manager for putting this on the agenda so early, really, given that he's barely had time to be run in, if you like, if it was a car. And it's excellent. And I take this as a sign that there's going to be an ongoing and developing relationship with the governing body, whether it's this one now and after the 4th of September, in relation to high performance of the organisation from top to bottom. And I thank him.
Thank you. I'm sure we all concur with those comments. Can I put the motion? All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. Thank you. Are there any requests for leave of absence? I hope not. Yeah, we would be in trouble. Yeah, right. None of those allowed. 15, no authority. Stop it. Councillor Gladley, behave. Authority to affix council seal. The committee reports. Does anyone wish to speak about any of those four? The first one, 2, 3 and 4, okay? Okay, I'll take a motion to adopt items 16, 2, 3 and 4. Been moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded Councillor Gladley. No opposition, put the motion. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. 16.1 on that, page 121.
Yeah, I move this one, and I...
You're moving the recommendations? Thank you. Good.
Yeah, and all the recommendations. And I'd just like to thank the Arts, Cultural and Heritage Advisory Committee for, can't see it because I'm lost,
For having the wisdom of Solomon.
The mural recommendation. And just note that there's been a lot of appreciation from the Guyra community representatives expressed to me about that. And thank you so much for resolving what was a difficult situation.
Thank you. So you're moving the minutes on 16.1. It's seconded by Councillor Gladley. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. No matters of an urgent nature. Councillor?
This, it's definitely emergency for the flood zone people and stuff like that. Before I came in this afternoon,
Councillor, you need to ask what you need to convey what the matter is, and why is it urgent nature.
Sorry. It is donation of hay to the Taree drought flood people that have had it so hard. Thank you. I've had interest from a local trucking company that they would be happy if seeing Armidale Regional Council, that's in a very good situation at the present with they have got hay that they have been cutting and a hay supply, that maybe if we could make a donation of something to of some hay to the Taree people that are suffering from this terrible flood that's hit them, and he's willing to cart it down there for nothing. And I think some of the other hay organisations have come through there, so it's something that's needed fairly quickly. So this is where I think it's a bit of a matter of urgency. If we could just discuss it, that would be great. Thank you.
To the General Manager is where do we find the money, if we can? Directed that question to the General Manager. Okay.
Yeah, we might just get some clarity, Councillor Gladley, if you may, from what you're suggesting.
A local carrier provides hay for nothing.
The local carrier,
but the council pays for and collects some hay, gets some hay for transportation. Is that what you're saying?
That the council donates to the Taree community some hay. We're one of the few councils that's in a position that we can help another council out with hay, because we actually have got supplies of hay sitting. That we grow. Well, I think everyone knows we grow hay and we grow cattle, but not many councils do that. Sorry, but I'm sorry. I went around it presuming that everyone's in the same ballpark with this, but it would be a good thing if we had some
hay that's been sitting around for a while or whatever, and just as a goodwill to the people of Taree that are doing it hard, that we don't have it. If we can look into seeing what sort of stocks we've got of hay that we could probably donate, if that's the better wording. Sorry for my wording, but it might be a good gesture. Thank you.
Can you say something?
I've been told to
Mr.
wait.
McDonald.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just report back to the General Manager about what stocks are available up there, and then probably give you a value on that. But I do believe there is hay up there. We bale it up and silage it up, so there should be a bit there, and I'll just give the General Manager some advice about what's available and what that value, and then you make a decision about what you do or don't donate.
Mr Mayor, could I just ask a question of the mover?
Yet.
Can
We're
I
discussing it, but let's get to that point, I guess.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
We actually neighbour Kempseyshire, which has been as badly hit. In Lower Creek, I saw some photos of the booth places. All their all their land is underwater. I'm not saying we don't give it to Taree. I just hope that we look at our own backyard first, and maybe also the Nambucca Valley, just to see what their needs are. That's all.
What do you suggest? Here, heaps. Oh, our 600 something. Yeah. Just, you're talking about hay that we make out of the sewage farm. Right, I didn't get that. So it's hay that we have made. Right.
Do you want me to move a motion?
Yes, yeah, I think I'll let Councillor gladly move it. But so you're moving that we provide to the flood hit areas of the mid-north coast. That covers Councillor Bailey's concern. Whatever hay we can spare from what we produce at the sewer farm. Is that what we want to do? Okay. And you'll delegate to the General Manager the authority to do whatever's required in that regard.
And we have got a trucking company that's willing to transport.
I understand that. So the council's cost is only indirect in terms of hay that we've already made, and which might not be a general fund matter, Mr. GM, at the sewer farm. Okay, so that's moved, and are you going to second that?
I'm going to second it, and I've got something to say, but very briefly.
Okay,
well, I think it's proceeds foregone, but in this current situation up on the top of the hill where we are, we're all basically looking at being understocked and overgrassed at the moment. So I suspect the market for that hay might be a bit flat up here. So really, my experience is that when you lend a hand to a neighbour, it comes back tenfold, and I would support this on that basis.
I believe we're in furious agreement, so can I put the motion? All those in favour, to the contrary, carried.
Mr Mayor, can I put a supplementary motion as part of that, or another motion, that you launch a public appeal for hay from the farmers around this region to give to, and we act as a coordination point for hay to be given to our neighbours on the mid-north coast.
Thank you. I'll take that as a motion. I'm sure it's seconded by Councillor O'Connor. I don't think there's any need to debate that. More than happy to do that. We'll do that first thing in the morning, Mr GM, get some comms out. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. Notice on the business paper for your information, and the final matter is a confidential item. I'm in a bit of a quandary here, Mr GM. I forgot to ask you this. I've notified the councillors of my intention to add 2 clauses to your recommendation. I don't want to go into confidential if we can reasonably avoid doing that. So I don't think that what I'm going to add and what you've seen would cause us to have to go into confidential. Would that be so? Beg pardon?
I thought the General Manager expressed a contrary view at a previous meeting, but
I've just got to find it now, sorry. That's the attachments, that's not it. It's in my handwriting. Here we go. Now, there's nothing in what I'd like to add, and I don't think the General Manager's got any difficulty with what I've written there.
No difficulty, Mr Mayor, but I suspect if there's going to be some debate, then it may be prudent to go into committee.
Well, how about we get it on the screen and then we decide whether we need to go into committee for the discussion. A and B as printed on 19.1. Just need to bring up you. Okay, C is that council seek full cost funding from the New South Wales Government to fully restore the courthouse buildings, you've got council regrettably, where's council regrettably declines? B.
I would be
Okay, C,
foreshadowing that be
council seek
removed.
full cost funding from the New South Wales Government to fully restore, you've got it, that's it,
With
for $1, and the acquisition by council be outside the restricted community use policy, and that policy is about you're not able to lease any part of the courthouse for 15 years.
with respect, Mr Mayor, I would be proposing that we remove the words in paragraph B, regrettably decline, because I would think that the amendments really fall
This is in addition to the motion.
I know, but I would...
And I'm moving all four from the chair.
Well, I don't know when to say this, but I want to say that if we deleted from B, regrettably decline, we would then be in a position of putting a counter offer rather than a...
That's the intent of C and D.
I understand that, but there's a sort of somewhat contrary...
Anyway, look, it's my motion. If someone's willing to second it, that'd be good. Councillor Gallatley. And just very briefly speaking to it, we acknowledge what the General Manager said. We don't accept the present offer of $1, but we want to continue the dialogue to try and secure the building, and it's on the basis that they give us the money to do it up, and we want to not have to adhere to the restrictive community policy because we need to charge some lease income on parts of the building to cover our ongoing costs in the future. That's the intent, and that keeps the matter alive. But if we just go with A and B, it's all over, Red Rover.
I guess...
So I've just spoken for. You speaking against?
Yeah.
Okay, and the General Manager wants to give us some advice. Would you like to hear that first?
Yep.
Perhaps, thank you.
Mr Mayor, two things. One, I would probably strongly suggest we go into confidential, and the two is, if I could suggest a slight change at C to perhaps just say accept the property at nominal value. But
If the GM's advising us to go into confidential, we must do that. So we now move out of ordinary council into confidential to consider 19.1. Pardon? Yes, I do. You're moving that, and it's seconded, Councillor Gallatley. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. Thank to the contrary, carried. And the next motion is which one? Remind me again. Business done or something like that? Yes, that's right.
Now recorded
In open council.
is now adopted, thank you, in the public meeting. Yeah, we got there.
Very good. That's the first time I've ever heard Owen speak in a council meeting. Well done. Thank you. It's moved and it's seconded. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. Declare the meeting closed at, what is it, about 8 minutes past 6. And thank you.